came to me and it was Christmas time. And her husband had told the judge she was crazy and that he needed custody of the children. And so the judge entered an order because the husband had told some things that were not correct and true. The judge believed it, signed the order based on what he was told. And I mean, anybody would have because the allegations were horrible. But it was Christmas time and these kids.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Bree Sullivan-Howell, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears her name, the Sullivan Firm. Bree, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, let's jump right over and take a look. This is Bree's website, and you can go online and just go to sullivan-firm.com. That's sullivan-firm.com. And she's actually been featured on lots of different things. She has a book. We're going to talk about that a little bit today as well. Crush Your Divorce. You can actually buy the book on, I think, Amazon. Is that what that says? Yep.
That's
So
right.
you can get it down there. She runs a law firm down in Georgia, in Thomasville, Georgia. So we're going to be talking about the ins and outs of what she does in her practice today. But if you are in Georgia and you need an attorney who specializes in the areas that she specializes in, you can go to sullivan-firm.com. We will have a link to that down below in the description. I think she also had a phone number on here somewhere. I lost where it went, but if you Google her online, I'm sure you can find it. There it is right there. 229-226-1940. That is 229-226-1940. Before we get started, as always, we're going to jump over and read from our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is National ERC. You may have noticed that the world went through a pandemic pretty recently, and a lot of businesses were forced to shut down or had reduced hours, had supply chain interruptions, etc., and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know still is that Congress passed the CARES Act, which allocated over $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. It's not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. This is functionally free money in the form of a retroactive tax credit that businesses can get right now. It can be anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 per W-2 employee that you had. There is still time to claim this. There's less than a year and it will be gone. So if you've not claimed it, go to nationalerc.org. You can use their calculator and see how much you could get back. There is no cost to use the calculator, and there's never any fee unless they are successful in getting money for you. And then it's just a small percentage of whatever they get back for you. The average business that they work with gets back over $200,000 that they can invest in their business however they see fit. And I believe they've gotten back over $1.3 billion in funds for small businesses. So if you run a small business and you were employing W-2 employees during the pandemic, visit nationalerc.org. Our second sponsor today is Groove Funnels, and they're actually changing things up to us, or up for us, rather. You can visit them by going to theattorneypost.com/groove. That's theattorneypost.com/groove. You can unlock the power of Groove Enterprise for a limited time, the ultimate marketing and automation platform for just $497 a year. That's only $42 a month when paid annually compared to the regular $299 a month fee, and this includes unlimited websites, unlimited funnels, unlimited contacts, unlimited forms, unlimited products, unlimited affiliates, unlimited videos, unlimited blogs, courses, stores, webinars, etc. Basically, this is a marketing powerhouse from internet marketing legend Mike Filsame. And if you ever wanted a website that allows you to buy and sell products, that allows you to have webinars, that allows you to do anything you want, it's a Swiss Army knife of a tool, and it's cheaper than all of the other options out there added together. It's literally half the price of those. And right now they're doing a special for $497 a year, which is like ridiculously cheap. As somebody that runs a company, I can tell you that is a small marketing expense for your entire year to be able to use their platform. So you can try it for free today and get started at theattorneypost.com/groove. That is theattorneypost.com/groove. All righty, back to Bree. Well, Bree was born and raised in southern Georgia. She graduated with honors from Deerfield Windsor School and the University of Georgia with a perfect 4.0 GPA in journalism and PR back in 1999, which is when I graduated from high school. She has a very extensive academic and leadership accolades. She includes, including memberships in numerous honor societies, and she's been recognized as one of UGA's outstanding senior leaders. She earned a full scholarship to Mercer University's Walter F. George School of Law, graduating cum laude in 2002, and has since established a distinguished career in family law. She's the founder of Sullivan Firm LLC and the author of many books, I believe, aimed at supporting women of faith throughout their divorce process. So that was kind of a mouthful, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can say that I wasn't able to put in there. So my first question to you, Bree, is what did I miss?
Well, you didn't say anything about my personal life. I do have three children. Two of them are in college, and one is still in high school, but I'm in the home stretch to an empty nest. I'm married to Jefferson, who is someone, my husband, that I reference in my book, that just came out in February, and just living a quiet life here in South Georgia.
That's awesome. We're gonna be hitting 20 years ourselves this summer, and we've got five kids. My oldest just completed her freshman year at college, but my youngest will be going into kindergarten, so we've got a while.
Oh, you got a span. That's amazing.
Yeah, they're kind of spaced out funny. So we've got some time before we're going to wind up in the empty nester syndrome, but that's okay. So Bree, if I didn't know anything about you and you and I were stuck on an elevator for a couple of minutes and I was like, "Hey, what do you do? What do you do? Give me your pitch."
Well, professionally, my passion is just people and their needs. And so family law was a natural niche for me and my personality. Um, people walk in here with all kinds of issues, and I get to know them deeply within the first hour because they tell me all their assets, all their issues, all their personal problems, all their heartbreak. We keep Kleenex on the table. We bond in that first hour, every time. And so that's what I do. At the core of it is it's deeper than the law. It's more of a heart-to-heart connection that I'm hoping to make with each client. And I feel like I'm collecting friends every time I get a new client. So it's a passion. It's my ministry to the world. I feel like I'm in the spot. All the family law needs, are met as well. It's a legal job, of course, but the relationships are what matter to me the most.
Awesome. Awesome. So what got you into law? You've got a background in PR. You've got, did you kind of stumble into this, or is this something that other girls are playing with Barbie and you were watching Perry Mason reruns? Like what was the trajectory that got you into law? And then ultimately, I know you said you like to help people, but what got you into family law?
Well, it was Perry Mason and it was Matlock. You may remember him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and I joke often that when other girls had pictures of Kirk Cameron and Ralph Macchio in their lockers, I had pictures of women in business suits holding briefcases. I've always been a law nerd my entire life, and always aspired to be in this position that I'm in now. It's just always been something I wanted to do. And I went into PR and journalism only because I wanted to have a fallback and a skill in case I didn't get into law school. It was just more of a marketable degree than something like English or history. So that's why I did that. But I now use the PR in my practice to market my practice. So that's been interesting too.
Well, what's really funny is I have my degrees in philosophy and history, and I always looked
Mhm.
at law for a good long while. And I always joke, with degrees in philosophy and history, I can ask the deep questions in life, like paper or plastic, or you want fries
Uh-huh.
with that. And so I went into
That's
marketing as
right.
well. I actually do PR as well. So
Yeah.
it's really kind of funny. We had similar trajectories, and I looked at law, but I already had three kids, and I had to put food on the table before I could
Yeah.
get through law school. So
Yeah. It's a lot to take on with a family. I'm glad I did school before I had my kids. It would have been a lot.
So let me ask you this. There's a question I didn't give you in the pre-roll, but we were talking. One of my sponsors is National University. We talked about the pandemic, and I do find people in different places had very different experiences with that. So I do like to just ask, how did the pandemic affect you? How did it affect your practice? How did it affect the clients that you see? And has it carried over any sort of effects or ramifications to the way that you practice law now?
Well, that's a great question. In South Georgia, we just kept on trucking. It was not a situation where our courts sat down like some places. There's a nearby town that still does WebEx hearings exclusively because they lost a lot of people to COVID in their town and even in their courthouse. So they've kind of stuck with the WebEx approach, the online, um, telecommunication approach to having a hearing. I don't find that to be as effective. So I'm glad that our courts locally in my town and our local circuit never shut down all the way. Our judges were doing a lot of that, virtual hearing in the beginning, but we only did that a short period. Once we knew nobody was going to be dying in the streets, our guys wanted us in court, in person, because it's the most effective way. And I think the carryover has been that we learned how to communicate and do business like you and I are talking now. And it's been very effective, especially for clients far away. I've been doing more consultations this way. Like on weekends, I can do meetings from my house, or on vacation, I can even take a meeting if I want to, or appear at a hearing this way if the judge will let me. So it's been a nice resource to discover. And I don't think we would have discovered it without COVID.
I think you're absolutely right. My listeners know this, at least my longtime listeners will know, but I ran this podcast years ago. And back then we were using Google Hangouts. And
I remember that.
It was a very awkward platform to use. And a lot of people didn't know it. And they had to have a Google account and getting everyone like walking them through the process. And then we had an issue where we lost our whole channel because somebody else was duplicating our content, but there's no appeals board with YouTube. So I actually put this podcast on hold, and then the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden attorneys knew how to Zoom. I didn't have to walk them through, this is this thing, it's called Zoom, and you put it on your computer, and like everyone just knew how to Zoom. And so that actually was the rebirth of the podcast as well, which is kind of funny. So it's interesting to see how different people were affected by the pandemic. And I talked to attorneys in California, New York, very, very strict. I've talked to attorneys in Texas, and like half of Texas was very strict and half of Texas was very much like you, just kind of laissez-faire in the way that they approach the pandemic. So God willing, we're done with it, and the worst of it is behind us, and that is my earnest hope. I have some fears and trepidations, but we're not going to get into that because I try to keep apolitical when I'm on the podcast with my guests. So let's talk about your firm a little bit now. You guys are a full-service law firm focusing on areas of divorce, family law, and mediation. Is that right?
Primarily, I focus on family law. I do a little bit of everything in the small town as it comes through the door, as any small town practice has to be from time to time. I do a few wills here and there, but primarily it's the family law that I like to focus on. Okay.
And how far away do you work? So you're in Thomasville, which I don't think is a super huge area in Georgia, but how far away do some of your clients come from?
Well, we are about as far south in Georgia as you can be. So we're about 30 minutes north of Tallahassee, Florida. A lot of FSU fans live here. And I travel right now. I've got a case all the way at the east coast of Georgia, over by the water. I go up to Macon. I have some cases occasionally in Atlanta if they can be attended virtually. And I go west to the Alabama line. So I'm a traveling lawyer, I guess you could say.
On the move all the time. There's a visual representation for you guys if you want to see. And of course, you can go on our website, click on contact, and it'll take you down to the little zoomable window. Not the biggest thing in the world to see, but it's kind of nice to see. So there's Thomasville, and sure enough, there's Tallahassee right down there. So now do you operate just in Georgia then?
I'm only licensed to practice in Georgia. That's correct.
And then you wrote a book as well, or at least one, if not two. And I don't know how far into this you want to get, but it's called Crush Your Divorce, How to Crush Your Divorce and Keep Your Faith. What was the impetus behind that book? Why did you write it? Who's it for?
Well, it's for Christian women going through divorce, because I was a Christian woman going through divorce in 2018. And I realized when it was me, after counseling thousands of people through their divorces, that it's very different when it's you, and the stresses are different, and it's a gut-wrenching situation, and you just need resources, stuff to read, and reassurance that it's going to be okay. So this book was written to give people hope. It's for Christian women. I'm working on the version for men, and it's going to be Crush Your Divorce for Men. But it has a lot of scripture in it. It's also got a lot of practical tips on how to get through your divorce and help your attorney prepare your case, because that's not in existence anywhere. It's not legal advice, of course, but it's just general principles of, behave yourself. These are pitfalls people run into. Don't do these things, or, talk to your lawyer about these particular things and get guidance before you make a move, So it's just a practical aid. It started as a guide for my clients. I was just going to give them. I thought it would be like 30 pages, and it turned out to be 400
A little
plus
bit longer.
pages. Yeah, so it came out February. It's done really well. It got to the top 10 on Amazon in the divorce category, so I'm real proud of
Nice.
that. And my next one is coming out soon this month, Crush or Comeback. This has the strip on there because it's just the proof from Amazon, but it's coming out soon, and it's the follow-up is for what you do afterward to rebuild your life. So just born out of my own experiences and tips of, just good living and wisdom and just things I think will help. So
Nice. That's really awesome. Well, we will put a link to that as well. You can get it on Amazon. Just click the link down below in our description box when you guys are watching this, and you should be able to get a copy of that or take a look. It looks like it's doing really well. You've got, it's available with 37 ratings and a 5.0. You did get, I think, one 4-star. Uh-oh, right?
but they didn't
But
say anything. They didn't put
it's
any
just a blank
comment. Like, I don't
4-star.
know why it wasn't a 5. It broke my heart, but whatever.
That's all right. That's all right. Your overall is still a 5.0. And I'll say sometimes having one or two, like 3 or 4s tells you that it's probably real, right? If I see somebody that's got 10,000 reviews and they're all 5.0, I'm like, that feels a little suspicious. So we'll know that they're real, I guess. That's important. Well, that's really awesome that you wrote a book. So let's talk about your practice a little bit. I'm going to start by asking maybe a more difficult question. My longtime listeners know that I like to ask this question. I'm a firm believer that as long as you learn from your failures in life, they're not really failures, they're just slow burn wins. So in your practice of law, Bree, can you tell us about a time when you experienced what you would consider to be a failure, but what you learned from that, how you carry that forward to help your clients? It can be, a witness or even a client who just said the wrong thing on the stand. It can be you didn't fill out the paperwork in time. It could be that you thought the judge was, just a terrible person. I don't know. But can you tell my listeners about a time when you experienced what you consider a failure, but what you learned from that?
Well, I think there's a learning curve with young lawyers in general, especially if you're a courtroom attorney like I am and was. When I was first starting out as a courtroom attorney, I realized there's a lot to learn on the fly because you sort of learn on the job with that kind of work. And things get thrown at you and you have to respond right away, and you don't know really what you're going to say until you get there. You can't be scripted in some settings. But when you told me this question would be asked, I had to think about it. And I think the error I made most early in my career was that I didn't present evidence correctly. I didn't think through enough how to get it authenticated and have no objection raised. And you learn that with time. Once you come to understand all those rules of evidence, and there's so many, but once you learn them and know how to use them effectively, you can outlawyer anyone if you have better evidence. So you have your evidence together, it's all certified, it's authenticated the way it needs to be. You got the witness there to get it in the record. There's nothing worse than having a judge say, I'm sorry, the objection's sustained. I'm not going to consider this thing. And it was like you're smoking gun. So I learned that lesson over the first few years, and I hope I don't ever make those mistakes again. It makes all the difference in a case.
I can imagine. Absolutely. That must be devastating to think you got it in the bag and then all of a sudden, like, the linchpin is not even allowed. It's inadmissible for whatever reason. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy. And that's something that's
Well,
beyond me. I never had to deal with it. So
yeah, it's a whole art of its own, and nobody teaches you that in law school. It's one of those things you have to learn on the job as you do it, especially like I was a sole practitioner early on, just working for myself, and I didn't really have a mentor. I had at the very beginning a mentor, but then I went out on my own and opened my own practice. So I didn't have somebody down the hall to say, hey, how do I get this into evidence? So I was just trying to figure it out as I went and still had pretty good results, all things considered, but I could have done it better. So that's the one thing I would go back maybe and change.
there you go. That's good advice. So what's the flip side then? I'm sure that there's a couple of things that you're just proud of, right? Maybe one of the first cases that was a huge win, or maybe it was, a divorce that was a really painful or bad situation for the family, for the kids or whatever it was, and it resolved well. But can you tell my listeners about maybe one of the, I say the feather in your cap, right? One of the things you're most proud of in your practice that you've been able to do or been able to help.
Well, there have been so many times where there was just an unjust situation. And I came in and was able to come alongside and present it in a new way and turn the tide for the client toward, the outcome they wanted. There's one particular client that comes to mind when you mentioned that. She came to me and it was Christmas time, and her husband had told the judge she was crazy and that he needed custody of the children. And so the judge entered an order because the husband had told some things that were not correct and true. The judge believed it, signed the order based on what he was told. And I mean, anybody would have, because the allegations were horrible. But it was Christmas time, and these kids had been taken from their mother. And so she didn't get to see them at all during Christmas. And she had been a stay-at-home mom. She was kicked out of the house. He had the children. He thought he had it in the bag because she had limited resources. He didn't think she would hire an attorney and do anything. Well, she came and got me over the Christmas holidays. I was able to see her and get her in fast. And by the end of January, she had her kids back because we went to court and exposed all the lies. And it was a hard Christmas for her, but today she has children. And if you don't have a good attorney come alongside you in that setting, you lose because the allegations are so awful. I mean, you have to. So we were able to prove the things that he had done, which were abusive and hateful and just dishonest. And the judge saw the truth and reversed his own opinion. So in the end, it worked out beautifully, and I'm really proud of that. And to this day, that lady and I are really good friends. And that's how it ends up. I've become bonded with these people, It's like I get sisters and brothers. So that's my favorite part of it.
Awesome. That's awesome. And to hear that you made such a big difference is it's got to feel good at the end of the day. And yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's going to pull such an underhanded maneuver, I feel like as long as you can show that that's what they did, like, I feel like that has to pull the rug right out from under them because it's like sawing off their own tree branch that they're on. Like that's your credibility has to be shot at that moment as long as you can make that case. So that's awesome.
Right. That's right.
So how do you balance the emotional aspects of family law and legal responsibilities? Have you ever had a client where maybe you thought what they wanted wasn't in their best interest or their kid's best interest? And if that ever happens, what do you do in that situation? How do you balance the ethical and the legal?
Well, people often want things that are not in their best interest, but they have to decide that on their own. You can't tell somebody how to really feel about something. All you can do is point out the wisdom of a certain approach versus maybe the pitfalls of it. And that's what I think a good lawyer does. We're not just lawyers, we're counselors. That's what they teach you in law school anyway. I had a whole class on that at Mercer. We're taught to come alongside them and help them see how a decision can play out. Let's analyze this before we take a position and pursue it. You got to think like a chess player. If you make this move, they're going to make this move, and then you're going to make this move, and then it's going to end up here. Do you want to end up here? And I talk about this in my book. In your divorce strategy, you've got to think in terms of chess. You got to be thinking 5 moves down the line. You can't be just focused on right now. So, that's the thing. And it's often not an ethical question. Because that's easy for me. I'm not going to go into court and say that. Like, get a different lawyer. If it's unethical, I'm just not going to do it. But often it just comes down to helping them be that the positions they take need to be wise and need to be reasonable. You don't want to go to court and take a position that's going to make you look foolish or hot-headed or possessive or selfish or something like that. You've got to be level to have credibility with a court. So that's what I try to encourage my clients to do.
Sure. Going back to the question I asked you earlier about the pandemic, did you notice a pandemic bump, with people being locked down, or if your whole area just didn't really lock down, maybe it didn't do anything? I've talked to family law attorneys on both sides of this issue. Some say that they saw huge spikes and it never came down, and others say actually their business went down in that time, and statistically in their area, divorces went down. What was your experience on that, just out of curiosity?
I would say it was probably intense coming out of the pandemic. People being locked down like you would anticipate. You know, if you're miserable and you're not allowed to escape occasionally,
Yeah.
that's a problem. You know, that creates a powder keg for more domestic violence. I think that's what I saw more than anything was just more explosive behavior in the house that we had to then go get protective orders for because somebody's not safe, you know. And what was hard was that a lot of people were not able to get to an attorney to get help when they were in an abuse situation during the pandemic because they couldn't leave their houses or they felt like they could, or they thought the lawyers were shut down or they assumed or whatever. And I think we had a tick in more violence and abuse and things, financial abuse, all the kinds of abuse that happen were just escalated during that period. But then when it was over, I think I had as a result when they came out of the fog and realized something's got to give. We just had a breaking point, you know.
Gotcha. What role does mediation play in your practice? Do you use that as a principal tool when working with clients? Are you allowed to be a mediator and have them as a client at all? Do you have to have an outside mediator? How does that work out?
Well, I'm a mediator. I'm registered in the state of Georgia as a mediator. So I can serve as a mediator. And the mediator's role is to be neutral and go between the two sides and not take a position or have an allegiance to either side, but to have allegiance to reaching a deal. Like the mediator's goal is to settle this dispute and listen to both sides, shuttle diplomacy, try to get the people to both see reason to get their case resolved. So that's the one role. But I do a lot of mediations where I'm one of the attorneys and for one side in the room with my client and the mediator going between our rooms. And that is required in our circuit. And in a lot of circuits around here, we have to do mediation before you're allowed to schedule a trial. And I find that mediation settles about 85 to 90% of my cases. So, you know, people don't want to pay for a trial that's going to be super expensive. They want to control the outcome because judges don't always understand everything thoroughly in the few hours you have in a trial. So people see the wisdom in it, and I think it's a great tool.
About collaboration, do you do collaborative divorce? Is that a thing that you focus on, or is that something that is just a jargony buzzword, or is that a best case scenario?
It's kind of a buzzword. I don't call it that. I think where we are, it's more of we call it contested or uncontested. So collaborative is just more like, let's all get along, let's collaborate and come up with a resolution, is how I understand it. It's described in other places. Where I am, we just try to settle cases. I mean, we're all about preparing a set of terms. At that first meeting with every client, I say, send me your best case scenario settlement terms. Just send me your wish list. And that way I start the case knowing what my goals are. Like my perfect world, what is that going to be? And then we try to get the client there. You never get everything you want, but that's a good starting point. And sometimes, and I do this a lot, you can settle the case before it even goes to court.
You ever had a case that settled because the couple resolved their differences and got back together? Does that happen frequently or infrequently? And is your experience that those tend to still peter out eventually, or do some of them go on and make it another 30 years?
It depends on the people. That happens sometimes. That happened today, actually. I had someone call and say, we've reconciled, just close it. So good for them. Wish you well, you know, but I'm here if you need me again. And they come back sometimes. It just depends on the people. But if somebody can stay together and be happy, fantastic. That's one more victory for the world. But I did have one case probably 15 years ago. We had settled it. We went in, we finalized it. The judge stamped it, signed it, said, you are divorced. We walked outside. I did some other stuff in the clerk's office before I went out. And I went outside and found those two people in the parking lot making out with one another. And they had just gotten divorced. So love is a funny thing, and so is divorce. There's no way to know what's going to happen.
That's funny. That actually reminds me, I forgot to ask you, one of my other favorite questions is what's one of the most, and that maybe this is it, I don't know, but what's one of the most absurd things you've encountered in your practice of law?
Absurd. I don't
Silly, or
know.
just makes you shake your head and you're just like, what in the, why in the, and again, maybe that was it because that was like,
Well,
man, that's absurd.
that was a memory that made a mark. I mean, I never forgot it. It was very unusual. Um, some of the positions people take are just ridiculous. I mean, people dig their heels in and won't settle their cases over the dumbest things. Like they'll say, you get the $1 million beach house, but I'm gonna have that shuffleboard table that your mom gave us. You know, it doesn't make any sense. And they won't settle their case over something like a shuffleboard table. Or one time I had a knockdown drag out in my office between a couple fighting over bobblehead dolls. They were fighting over who got what bobblehead. Like it was, I sat there thinking, I'm in the twilight zone. I went to law school for this. And it was just mind-boggling. But to those people, that mattered, you know? And if it matters to you, that is something you cannot dissuade a person from caring about. And you just have to get in there with them and say, okay, well, what's it worth to you? You willing to give up some money? You willing to give up a car? What do you, I mean, everybody's got their own view of what something's worth. So it can be absurd on the outside, but to those people, it is not absurd.
Actually, that reminds me, I was talking with another family law attorney. In fact, her interview is scheduled to go live, I think, at the end of this week or the beginning of next week. Her name is Deborah Whitson. And she said that she had a case, and I don't remember the exact details, but I think it was they agreed on everything, but the boxed set of what is it, the Game of Thrones. Like they had the
Oh, my
DVD set.
word.
And she's like, listen,
Hmm.
let's just let him have it. I will buy you a new, better
Yeah,
copy and we'll be done.
yeah,
That's my gift to you, my divorce gift to you.
yeah,
And she's like, okay, fine, let's do it. And she said
yeah,
there was
they got
another
it
one.
done.
It was like a China doll or something. Like, and for whatever
Yeah,
reason, that was the one thing that
yeah,
nobody could get over. And so it is absurd, the things that we sometimes get hung up on. But sometimes there are emotional attachments that we don't
right.
see because it's just a thing. But
Well, it's
anyway,
not your
that's fun.
life. That's the
Yeah.
thing. It's not your life. It's their life. And they care about it for some reason or some memory or some emotional connection that matters to them. And it's not for the objective observer to have an opinion about it. I just take up the banner and fight for the thing they want, you know,
Yeah.
and hope it doesn't take forever.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah.
None of these long, overdrawn out scenarios, 10-year long. What's the longest time you've spent resolving or handling a case?
Oh, wow. I've got one right now that was pending since 2018. I do a little bit of personal injury too, just when people need it. And it ends up being normally just my family law clients have a personal injury and I will help them. I don't advertise that much, but
Mhm.
I will take those occasionally, but it's in Atlanta and it's been pending since before the pandemic. So
Wow.
the
That's
pandemic
like
threw
six,
off
7 years.
court
Yeah.
schedules. Everything got behind and it's still pending. So that's been probably my longest case. But you just don't ever know. Sometimes people want to leave their case open, especially like a divorce. They'll settle everything, but they're getting along okay. And one party's on the other's insurance policy. So they want to leave it open so they don't lose their insurance or something. So we deliberately leave them open for some people for a long time until the judges say, what's up with this? You know, we got to get rid of this thing. So,
It's kind of funny. I guess that seems like a very less contested divorce if they're willing to do that to help their spouse out or whatever and leave them on like I guess it's good to see that at times, and it is just a legal decision at the end of the day. Um, have you noticed any shifts in the last, I don't know, decade or so as we've really seen the rise of social media and these little black rectangles that we carry around with us? Has that shifted anything in your practice of law? Has it shifted the types of cases you see? Or is it just one more avenue of noise and or evidence?
well, there are two things you touched on it, the evidence, the volume of evidence we have. Now with all the text messages, it's just page after page of communications between people. And it's increased our workload a good bit. You've probably heard that from other attorneys. And it's been good that we've been able to evolve into a period of e-discovery where we're emailing things and sending server links instead of hard copies like we used to mail, in the US Postal Service mail. And with all that postage we had to pay. But it has changed how we handle evidence. It has changed the substance of the evidence we have in court. GPS tracking has been game changing in my cases. People track their children. People track each other. They shouldn't, but they do. They have Life 360. They're dropping air tags and license plates and stalking each other that way. All these electronic things, I mean, they've come along and it's changed a lot of what we talk about in court. It used to be you'd have to get a private eye to put a tracker on somebody's car, and now it's people tracking, like I'm saying, air tags in the diaper bag, or they're sewing air tags in the soles of the child's shoe. So everybody knows where the child is, and therefore they know where the parent is. It's weird and creepy, but it's happening.
I mean, it's way cheaper to buy the $60 air tag, or I don't even know what they cost. Maybe they're cheaper than that than it is to hire a PI, I guess. So,
But illegal. See, I mean, that's the problem. And people don't know. And so they do this. They come into the office. They say, well, I know where he was on this day. And here's how I know. And I'm like, no, don't tell me. Don't tell me that. It's not helpful.
If they tell you
we
that,
got to get this in a different way.
Yeah, if they tell you that, what do you do? What is your next course of action? Are you required to even like I turn them in or file anything, or you just kind of what do you do?
No, it's attorney-client privilege, first of all. I would never throw a client under a bus if they confess something to me that they've done, unless it's going to put someone in imminent harm. I think that's the rule. We don't have to disclose anything like that unless someone's about to be harmed or killed, and then you have to alert authorities and things. But
I'm holding them hostage. It's fine.
Yeah, that's never happened. I think it's mainly just been crossing of a line here and there, trying to get surveillance on your own life, like just these people trying to find out the truth of what's really going on because they're being lied to, and it drives them crazy. So they're doing what they can do on their own to get answers. And it makes sense. But then I have to tell them, well, we can't use that. Like, we're going to have to get this a legal way so it can be presented as evidence. It's like I was telling you earlier, you got to be able to get your evidence into the record.
Yeah.
And if it's not admissible or it was illegally obtained, it's not going to get in the record. So it doesn't help me. But that has changed a lot. And these phones too, I mean, kids are recording parents during visitation periods and sending recordings to the other parent, like, listen to this, daddy, mama's talking to you, like talking about you to me, and or whatever's happening, they're recording it in real time. And it's just changed everything. Nobody's got any privacy anymore. It just feels like that.
No, I agree. And my wife personally is, I don't say she's a Luddite, but she hates everything technological. She's got a smartphone, but she hates it. She never uses it. I think if she can go back to a Nokia or a flip phone or whatever, she probably would. I have multiple friends in this area that all went back to, the old Nokia bricks that will probably still be around when whatever replaces humanity is here in 10,000 years, right? Those things were industrial, but there's no text messaging. Well, there's text messaging, but there's no video, no phone, not phone, no social media is the word I'm looking for. No scrolling through pictures, no Instagram, whatnot. So maybe that's where we need to go back.
We waste a lot of time looking at a screen. And
we do.
I heard somebody say not long ago that this is not even about law practice, but in general, just humanity has changed. Like somebody said, if aliens landed and saw us looking at our phones like this, they would think that's what we worship.
Yeah.
They would think this is our God.
They have their little black
sense.
rectangular God. No, I would agree with that.
When we wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is, oh, look, it's the first thing I do. And I saw something else. I'm a Christian, so I follow a lot of Christian pages on my phone that I'm looking at all the time. And one of them said not long ago, what if we picked up our Bible as often as we pick up our phone and read it? Like that's a convicting thought.
Yeah.
Because we waste time on these things. They're just a mind suck. I do it too, but it's a real problem. I think it's an addictive thing to have.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I am willing to cut this question out if you're not comfortable answering this question. But because you mentioned being Christian, I'm Christian as well. I'm actually Catholic.
Oh, wow.
And the Catholic Church is one of the few churches that doesn't do divorce, right? And we admit that civil divorce is a thing, but like, two validly baptized people that are married together can't be
Mhm.
separated. Whereas within most of the rest of Western Christianity, it's kind of become an accepted thing. What is
Mhm.
your take on that, right? You can be as detailed or undetailed as you want, but since you're willing to lead with your faith, I'm happy to ask that question. How do you balance? Because Jesus seems to say, in the beginning it wasn't so, and Moses permits a bill of divorce because of the hardness of your hearts, but it wasn't so. And obviously, I'm sure you deal with clients that aren't Christian, so I mean that is less binding on them than it would be, on a Christian. But how do you balance that faith dynamic with doing family law?
Well, I think that's a great question and I think that's why there's no book like my book, because nobody wants to talk about that question. I mean, you go to the Christian bookstore and all the books are about not getting divorced, stay together, be submissive. These are ways you stay together. But nobody talks about what happens if someone's being mistreated or they get abandoned or someone's cheated on you and they're not coming back. These are things I think the Bible supports a divorce happening with. I mean, I just don't think, based on my understanding of scripture, and I talked about this a lot in the early parts of my book. Um, I just don't think God has any of us in abuse on purpose. And I think divorce is a blessing to people who have been mistreated. And I know it's a blessing to people who are being betrayed and cheated on, because you just can't live like that. You can't live day to day with a person who is stepping out like that and in your face audaciously, ignoring their
Yeah.
vows. And I mean, just you have no self-respect. And that is not who we are in the Lord. That is not who women are who are Christians. The Bible tells us that we're special. We're God's dearly loved children. He has a plan for each of us. He knew us before we were born. He knew us when we were conceived. It's a special thing. We're all made in his image. He doesn't want to see us suffering. And so if someone is suffering and you're a child of God, I mean, I feel like it's got to be between each person and the Lord, first of all. It's not my business to judge how you got in my office or if you're okay getting divorced or not. That's really bigger than my pay grade. But I will tell you, everybody who comes here is hurting and they got married with the best of intentions. And somewhere along the way, their hearts were broken and there's no fixing that. So they're just trying to go forward the best way they can. So my job is not to judge, really. I just come alongside and I love them and I help them feel like there's hope. And that's what the book is all about. But I have a chapter called God Hates Divorce, which is that famous part of the Bible in Malachi, God hates divorce. But there's more to that passage than people like to talk about. And I talk about it. So check it out in section 1 if you really want
Huh.
to know.
That sounds like a good read, and so that's a good reason for us to replug your book. So you can go online and get it, and we'll put a link to it down below in the show notes. Bree, I appreciate you being very open and honest about that because it's a tough question to deal with, but I'm sure it's one that you've had to spend a long time thinking about, and I like hearing your honest take. Which is
Mhm.
great. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today as well. I don't want to monopolize your entire, for us here today, recording this, it's a Friday. Um,
Mhm.
so I don't want to take up your whole day. So here in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you my two closing questions. Question number one, if you could go back in time, meet young Bree and give her some advice other than the obvious, invest in Bitcoin, trust me. What advice would you give yourself and why? And question number two is if I gave you my magical pen and with this pen, you could edit a law, add a law, or delete a law from the books. And this can be a law with sweeping national, maybe even international ramifications, or it could be a stupid law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate 8 times a week, and it's just an annoyance that you don't want to deal with anymore. What law would you change and why? While you percolate on that, we're going to jump back over here, and we are going to take a look again, if I can get this pulled up correctly, at your website. I am talking with Bree Sullivan-Howell, who is the lovely face behind Sullivan Firm. That is sullivan-firm.com. She is also the author of a series of books, including one that will be coming out very soon, and also Crush Your Divorce, available at Amazon. You can go to sullivan-firm.com and click on Buy the Book, or click the link down below and we'll have a link to it on Amazon as well. She has another one coming out. This one is for women. She has one coming out for men. And then you have another one that you just said was about like picking up the pieces when everything else is kind of finished. And that one's coming soon. You got the screener view or the screener print from Amazon. So that will be coming as well. So that is who we are talking with today. Our final sponsor for today is Rank with News. And you might find this interesting since you yourself have kind of an interest in doing PR stuff. Is being in the news regularly, or rather is not being in the news regularly, costing you or your business or your firm credibility, visibility, and money? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more about dumb luck than it is about science? What if there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News or Yahoo Finance, Forbes, Bloomberg, Reuters, AP News, Business Insider, etc., and see those articles ranking locally, even nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were actually looking for? Well, if you could do that, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page 1 of Google in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and permanently. It is functionally guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business or firm, visit rankwithnews.com to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or your business in major national 7- and 8-figure traffic news sites that can launch you overnight to page 1 and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwithnews.com. All righty. So, Bree, you and I go back in time. We see young Bree Sullivan-Howell, or maybe was it just Bree Sullivan then, fresh out of law school, and you're able to go up and give yourself just a little piece of advice. What advice are you going to give yourself and why?
Well, I think a lot of lawyers are probably wired like me. We all go to law school because we're the same kind of person usually. We're type A, we're methodical, we are analytical, we are careful. I was always fearful that things would not work out. And I think I overworked and I stewed over things and overanalyzed things. And I just worried a lot when I was a young lawyer. And I think if I could go back, I would say, honey, it's all going to be okay. Just enjoy it. Just try not to worry so much. Because I was a stress case. I was so worried that I would fail really at every step of the way. I mean, you talked about my credentials early on. I made really good grades in college and law school because I was so afraid of failing. So I just overworked, just over prepared. And I think a lot of us do that. But it's something I wish I'd maybe not done so much and just enjoyed it.
It's good advice. Enjoy the ride. Stop and smell the roses, as they say, right? Don't stress so much, and you're still going to fail your way forward anyway, like we all do.
Yeah. Tomorrow's coming one way or another. I mean, you can't control everything. So
there you go. Until the one day that it doesn't come, but that also is something that is outside of our control.
That's pretty morbid. I don't think we want to talk about that, do we?
Well, as a believer, I find it not so morbid, just a fact of life. It's just the next step in the process. Well, speaking of believers, I've got a magic pen here. This isn't actually a magic pen. It's a blessed pen. It is actually from a Benedictine abbey. So these are monks who live together. Free shout out for them, kansasmonks.org. They actually live like 3 blocks from my house, and I've known them for years. They're great guys. So if you guys are curious about the monastic life, go to kansasmonks.org. Really, really cool. But I think one of the fathers must have blessed this pen because I found it has a magical property. It can edit laws on the books. It can adjust laws, delete laws, or add new laws. So, Bree, if I loaned you my miraculous pen here from kansasmonks.org and I let you make one change, what law would you change and why?
Well, in our state, there's one law that has always bothered me. And it's that a man who is not married to the mother of his child has no rights unless he goes to court to have a court action and get a court order. So we just have a lot of young people who sign the acknowledgement at the hospital and acknowledge, yes, I'm the dad. And they think that's enough. But in Georgia, it isn't. And so a lot of them just walk around thinking they have parental rights. And then one day they realize they don't when the mother says, you can't get the child at school, or you can't see that record, or I'm going to make this call because you have no rights about where the child goes to school or whatever. So that's something I wish I could change, and make it a little easier for those rights to get established, because it can be difficult. And in other states, it's not that hard. It's just, it's the world we're living in now where people are just not getting married as much. And so, I help a lot of young men trying to get their rights established so they have a visitation schedule with the child, or a right to bond meaningfully that the mother's denying. And it's just not fair. So I wish it could be a little easier for those dads sometimes.
Random side question, but if the father is paying child support, does that automatically give him any kind of a right, or he can still wind up with zero rights to the kids and paying?
That's right. In our state, it is, those things are not inextricably tied. You can have parental rights and no child support obligation. And you can have a child support obligation based on a paternity test you took and you got hit with an order for money, but no rights to see that child you're paying for. Now, paying for the child helps your argument that you should have rights if you end up in court on that issue. Like if you've been paying, contributing, that's a good thing. It's a good bit of evidence, especially if you don't have a court order and you've been paying. But those things are not one and the same, and they don't go hand in hand. Just like a woman in our state is not allowed to just withhold visitation if there's a court order for visitation or for parenting time for that dad. A mother is not allowed to say, you can't have your weekend with little Johnny because you didn't pay me last week. Judges hate that because they see the value in the relationship apart from the money part. So people don't always get that. They think, well, she's not doing what she should do, I'm not going to pay her, but that's just not how it works. So,
Gotcha. Well, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. And that's kind of, I guess, how I figured it would shake out, but you never know. Well, Bree, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been absolutely a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I do always like to let my guests have the last word. Are there any parting thoughts of wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with?
It has been a pleasure meeting you, and thank you. You did mention my website for the law firm, but also I have a website for my book and my author profile, and that's at crushyourdivorce.com. If anybody's interested in learning more about the books I've written and the things I'm working on now. And I really appreciate the time.
There it is right there. We'll put a link to that in the description down below as well. That is crushyourdivorce.com, crushyourdivorce.com, and you can read more. Just crush your divorce and keep your faith, crush your comeback, devotional for divorcing, and everything else. So that is it's a great resource, kind of all in one there, which is very, very cool. So thank you for that. Well, again, Bree, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me and my listeners today. I've really appreciated it. For all of you who are watching online, as always, we do appreciate if you're watching this on YouTube, a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're on any of the podcast repositories as well, please feel free to rate us or comment or whatever it is. One of the most helpful things is if you know somebody who could benefit from this information. Maybe you know a Christian woman going through a divorce. Please share this podcast with them so they can get the resources that Bree has available. As always, this is the Attorney Post. I am your host, Justin West, and while this podcast deals with lots of legal questions and topics, it does not constitute legal advice. And if you do have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Now, if you're in the state of Georgia, I think Bree would be a wonderful resource for you, so please do feel free, again, to check her out online. That is sullivan-firm.com, or also crushyourdivorce.com to see her books and everything else. And until next time, this is Justin reminding you that if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, guys, thank you for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, bye-bye.